Welcome to the AICPA Town Hall Series, your resource for the latest news and updates on pressing issues facing the accounting profession.
Good afternoon and welcome to the AICPA Town Hall Series. I'm Eric Auskerson, one of your hosts for today, and as you can see, we're coming to you live. We're live at Engage in Las Vegas. We have close to 2,000 people here. The event, Barry, it's great all coming together. What an incredible 18 months we've had, but it's good to be back.
It's great to be back, and we really thank all the participants and the vendors and the speakers, everyone just sort of making the effort, and you know, that's what we have to do in our society today. We have to find those places to really make a difference and to sort of change some of the narrative, and we're certainly doing that at this conference and also with this live town hall.
Well, the town hall started back in April of 2020. It's something that we are thrilled to be doing with the profession. As we say, we learn from every one of these town halls. You bring us hundreds of questions. We have from 8,000 to 10,000 people attending regularly, and this is what it's all about. It's a high-impact broadcast where we bring to you timely and critical information. We do our best to interpret it, then we talk about strategies in building capabilities. It's twice a month now at 3 p.m., and once again, we really do appreciate you being so engaged with us, because this town hall is a very, very strategic and important element of what the AICPA does today. So let me cover today's agenda. We're going to kick it off with an economic outlook with Jill Schlesinger. She's a CBS commentator, financial analyst, Jill on the Money. I'm sure many of you have seen that. And she's one of our MCs here at Engage, and you'll be seeing her later today on the keynote stage. We're then going to get into a legislative and profession update with Barry Melanson, and then Lisa Simpson's going to be joining us for some technical updates, and we also have some of the leaders of the Engage conference, two practitioners which will be providing some insights to us. So here's the list of presenters. We'll introduce them as they join us on stage. And first off, I already gave a little bit of Jill's bio, but Jill, it's great to be with you, and let's just get right into it. We've been talking on the town halls for the past couple of months about this incredible economic growth. You wrote an article recently stating it's the highest growth that we've seen since 1984. So where do you see it going? Give us some of your thinking related to it.
I think we are due a payback. I mean, after a 3.5% contraction, the worst contraction since the Great Depression, we certainly were looking forward to a snapback. But that snapback has become sort of under a little bit of duress as people get nervous about things. But it does look like we are somewhere between 6 and 7% growth this year. It actually, you know, it looked like in the beginning, before we got this variant cropping up, it looked like we were going to have the fastest growth this year than we had since 1950, essentially after the GI Bill and all those people came back into the workforce. I'll take the 80s, it's fine. There's been some scarring that needs addressing. We still have millions of people who are sidelined. But I think that overall, most of the economists that I speak to are quite pleased. Most of the business owners, of especially the larger businesses, are really reporting pretty much thumbs up outside of leisure and hospitality. And I think that maybe the thing to remember is that, you know, if we look back 2 years, which is kind of like our reference point now, you know, the economy will recapture its size where we were, but there is some lost output, right? So we just want to look to see that there is continued progress in the labor markets and with small businesses. I think those are the two areas that are really still feeling the pain and the legacy of the COVID recession.
Well, Jill, you know we're with a group of trusted advisors here. I mean, last year they were focused on helping their business clients navigate, you know, the pullback that was caused due to the pandemic. What do they need to be thinking about related to their clients right now with this economic growth?
You know, I think that as each of you know, you have a practice that is predicated on the client. It is a client-centric focus always, and I came from the client business myself, and you cannot evenly create a recovery for everyone. I think that there is, what I'm hearing about the big concerns are around managing talent and managing the labor market overflow of COVID, right? What is this landscape going to look like? Who is going to be hybrid? Who's going to be full-time? How do we navigate it? How do we retain talent? A lot of people tell me that they're quite concerned that the younger generation has a much different work outlook than old farts like I. And since I got my start on Wall Street as one of 8 women with 800 men at the Commodities Exchange of New York on the floor, so I'm very into physical interaction. I also have very sharp elbows, so that's been very good for me. But I think that managing talent is really huge. And then I think the question, which we're going to talk about, around inflation is something that each person who is experiencing higher prices out in the universe, maybe not when you're out right this second, but how long this is all going to persist, I think those are the clouds that are hanging over, a little bit of a not all clear yet.
Well, let's get into that. And Barry, I want to bring you into this as well. So it is something that the firms are thinking about, as well as members in companies. So where do you see inflation going? There's an important Federal Reserve meeting that's occurring today. I don't know if you've got any insights on that.
Well, they always call me to tell me their decision before look, they're not going to do anything right now. Obviously, the Fed's got a dual mandate, right? To create an environment where people can get back to work, anyone who wants a job, but also to manage price stability. And the Fed had already said that they were willing to let inflation run hot for a time while more people got back to work. And I think that there was sort of a loose behind-the-scenes chatter among Fed officials that we really aren't going to know what the state of the labor market is until school's back in session. And that was a huge thing that they were hearing from a lot of the constituents and the 12 banks, right? The 12 regional banks. I think that inflation is running hotter than even they thought it was going to be. I think they didn't do a great job of talking to the public about their private concerns around inflation, because it's not a terribly hawkish Fed right now. It's sort of Jay Powell's down the middle. But I think that there could be higher inflation that persists longer. One economist said to me, we have supply chain issues that were already strained prior to the pandemic. The pandemic itself just created even more issues. And it takes a while for this to actually work out. And so I'm starting to think that inflation, yes, the supply chain issues are going to calm down, but I think it's going to be well into next year before we see it. And I think the Fed is going to really start to reconsider raising rates sooner rather than later.
Well, that would certainly send some reverberations if the rates go up sooner, but on the inflation period of time, that's probably the greatest span of disagreement right now, right? Because you certainly have a lot of people who will say, yeah, it's temporary, it's some of these construction and appliance type big ticket items, it's not people that are buying those things all the time. So, maybe it's not really a good indicator, and as you point out, I loved your term, by the way, scarring on the economy. As you point out, some of these things may linger. And I think small business, and I think people who advise small business are learning more about supply chain and how to help manage supply chain, because I get your point about it leading into it, and that has a big factor on inflation too, is the supply chain problems. But it really wasn't being felt prior to COVID. So it really gets aligned with COVID, don't you think?
I mean, I think that like almost everything that this horrible pandemic inflicted, when it comes to the financial fallout, it has acted as an accelerant to previous trends. So there were supply chain issues, that went on steroids. There was income inequality, that went on steroids. There was a real division between large and small businesses, and that's on steroids. And I think all of that is creating a little bit of havoc. And, we're not particularly the most patient of people, we Americans, and I think that everyone wants it all to be over faster. And I just think that a lot of this is going to persist. If I were still in the business of even of advising clients, because I'm a certified financial planner, again, it's not a CPA, I know, it's not as good as that. But
We agree with you.
I know that you
You
do.
did.
I sort of wondered if I could like sort of get hooded like a, like an honorary CPA. I get some sort of designation. That would be great.
That's not going to happen.
Never going to happen. I still have to take all those tests.
We got some courses for you.
So, I mean, I think that if I were still giving advice, I would say I think this is going to have a longer impact. Look, I mean, the great news is the government came out with a wild amount of help. You know, the fiscal reaction to this virus is unprecedented, which is an overused term, but it's just, we've never seen trillions of dollars pop into the economy. And I think, contrasting it with 2008, 2009, where I was a vocal critic of the government because I felt like they did a fantastic job of making sure that we didn't go into a multi-year depression by bailing out big financial firms. They did a lousy job of helping individuals who were underwater on their homes. They really did. So I think that there's been a more comprehensive approach, which has really saved our bacon. There's no doubt.
Yeah, I think too, it's been a bigger, and we talk a lot about it in the town halls, a bigger, sort of public-private partnership in this process than in others. And one of the things in the profession, and we talked about small business, and you referenced small business, I mean, we are a consumption-based economy, and a lot of that is fueled by employment and entrepreneurism in private business. Yes, big business employs a lot of people too, but more are employed in small business. And so our consumption notion has a big effect on inflation, and there was some pent-up non-spending that has been adding to this inflationary element as well.
Absolutely. I mean, look, you have people sitting at home for 16 months, many of whom have excess savings. There's $2 trillion of excess savings floating around. People are willing to pay up, and I don't know about you guys, but when I got on my flight to Las Vegas, it was filled. Including the drunk guy next to me in first class, which was quite an interesting. And the issue around pent-up spending is that, of course, it works great for a while, but here's the question. 6 months from now, are we going to see this kind of spending? I don't know. And I think the other issue is that, one of the things you referenced earlier about housing is that there was like a pulling forward of demand. People who were waiting. I had heard from all these people, oh, millennials don't want to buy houses. And I'm like, that's such crap. Of course they want to buy houses. They want to do it at the right time. They were waiting. All that demand got pulled forward during the pandemic. Housing market was on fire. Barry is a believer that the death of the cities is nigh. I'm not. And I would say that I think that even just that component of the inflation calculation, the housing component, do think rents are going to start to go up. I really do.
Well, I'll jump in here, and we're in the green room. We talked about a lot of things, so we'll let Barry comment on the cities in a minute. But let's just two more topics we want to cover. We want to talk a little bit more about the societal and what's happening with all this employee transition. We're talking about inflation, but you look at the job market now, and there's more job openings, I think, than unemployed, and all of these individuals changing positions. So how are you thinking about that?
Well, I mean, I think it's really fascinating that obviously there's a mismatch right this second, and I do think that this is going to start to reach some sort of equilibrium, meaning that there were certainly people who were home reconsidering their options, got some stimulus money, got the child tax credit. Maybe they don't want to go back to their crappy job working a fry-a-later for the summer. I wouldn't want to do that either. And they are looking around. There's a lot of mobility in the labor force right now, which is kind of fascinating. There's a lot of reports. There was all the political squawking. We got to cut off unemployment benefits. There's actually no proof. There was a new paper out this morning. No proof that cutting off unemployment benefits actually changed the employment landscape in those states. So it's really about school. It's about when school goes back in session. I am clearly focused on the dislocation of the folks like women, people of color, younger people who really got killed by this past 16 months, how they come back to work and the way they want to come back to work. I think that we have to be very careful before proclaiming on high, everyone needs to be back in the office. I know that all the Wall Street CEOs and investment bankers tend to be in that model. I think it is going to be a hybrid, and we're working it out. And I think flexibility and adaptability should be your friends right now. I think that Forcing people one way or the other is a great way to lose a bunch of really young and talented people to other professions that are more flexible. So look, we got a great lesson, right? Didn't we learn something in the last 16 months? It's not 100%, but on a dime, we were able to we turned our businesses around, we worked with our clients, people got back to work and people kept working. There's a lot of people who are left behind, and we want to see how we can have a more inclusive labor market.
Well, that's a great summary. And one thing we say all the time, one size doesn't fit all. So there might be a path for the Wall Street firms, there might be a path for one firm, and another firm will have a completely different path. So Barry, just some kind of concluding wrap up points here.
I think the point is that it's very complex. It's probably unlike what has ever been experienced before because of the factors, and so it's probably people are going to have wrong predictions in it. It's inevitable, right? And there are a multitude of predictions, and you know, what we hope is, I think, is the sort of the multiple moving forces from the Fed's actions to hopefully some semblance of cooperation in Washington, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that you can have that environment. You mentioned the housing and the housing tied to the cities. I think some of the young generation issue, the ability to work, I think there will be a period of time that will skew in that way. And if we think about in the last 30, 40 years of cities, there's been a lot of pendulums, and there's been cities that have been declared, you know, dead on arrival. I mean, certainly Detroit at a period of time, and then a rejuvenation. And so I think you will see some cities that will suffer more than others. And then probably if we were sitting here 6 or 7 years from now, we'd argue that they're starting to come back, because that's how economics works.
Yeah, and look, I don't think it's ever a bad thing to have like the churn. I think that's a really good thing for an economy, to have people come in, people leaving. You want to, you know, a bunch of people say, I don't want to live in New York City, I don't want to pay triple taxes, I want to move somewhere else. Great, goodbye. Then bring lots of new people in, and people will always want to be in places that are providing really interesting opportunities. Right. I'm really intrigued also by these tertiary cities, or as I call them, the wee cities. And those cities that saw a big spike in migration, so I'm talking more like the Austins or the Pittsburghs of the world. I want to see if they retain those people, whether they stick around. That would be great to see other cities kind of fill in the void, for sure.
Well, Jill, we look forward to having you in future town halls. Thank you for being here live with us in Vegas, and thank you for doing all you're doing here at Engage and moderating some other sessions.
Well, thanks very much, and thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you. Well, Barry, we're going to keep going. You know, this is the Power Hour here, so we're going to get right into Washington, D.C., and a lot going on there. We're going to recap a little bit of what we discussed on Thursday last week, but like always, things are evolving and changing. So right now, why don't you take a quick look at what's happening at the Biden infrastructure and tax proposals.
Yes, so we have budget, infrastructure, reconciliation, tax, sort of all melds together with different sort of possible outcomes. What predominantly is happening right now is, you know, one of our team members had a great analogy. There's 20 senators trying to hold a bipartisan coalition together. And if you study history of truly bipartisan action, they always have ups and downs. They have setbacks. There was a setback when there was a vote that Senator Schumer scheduled last week. They always are sort of just barely hanging on. And those that survive, something clicks and something comes together at that point in time. The staff person described it as a group of 20 people parachuting out, and you know how they try to make a formation and they really struggle to grab hands, and it's sort of very softly held together while they're falling before the chutes deploy. It's sort of that. It is there's fatigue that's setting in. There's a August reset that's right around the corner that is pushing some action from that standpoint, and you can be, optimistic or pessimistic as to actually how this plays out. I think the most important part for dealing with your employer or dealing with your clients is that you have, if there is a bipartisan infrastructure, then how it plays in the Senate, then how it plays out in the House is going to be very important. Will Nancy Pelosi schedule a vote, or will she wait for a budget bill to also come out of the Senate? That will make it very difficult for the Republicans to stay on board. because they'll feel like what's going to happen after the budget bill is a reconciliation bill in which a lot of the administration's programs that they don't agree with and huge amount of spending associated with it will just come right on top of that with a 50% vote in the Senate. And so that is sort of a key component of this. And right now the Speaker is saying we want to see the whole thing so that we can then handle what we want to put into it from a House perspective. That will probably cause the bipartisan to fall apart. Now, because it's being said that way right now doesn't mean it'll be said that way by the end of the week. And so that's really the scenarios. But where the tax aspects, which a lot of our members would be most interested in, where a lot of the tax aspects will come about is in a reconciliation bill. So we have to have an infrastructure bill, then we have to have a budget bill, and then once we have a budget bill, then they get a reconciliation opportunity that can be passed with just only 50 votes in the Senate. This is going to be later rather than sooner. And then the next question we tend to get is, well, will it be retroactive if there's tax changes? And typically, I think in this type of environment, it's not likely to have much retroactivity. I mean, there's always a chance that could change. But because there's actually 3 sets of legislation, and a couple of them can be combined, but it's a pretty complex process to actually get it through. And remember, the House majority is very, very small as well. It's not just a 50-50 vote in the Senate. Sometimes there's 6, 7, 8 Democratic majority in the House because people resign or get ill or whatever in the House. And so holding the Democratic Party together in the House on stuff like this is very difficult because you have a very liberal set of folks, you have a more moderate set of folks, and you have people running for re-election in purple states in 2022. That's right around the corner. So nothing is certain. We do believe something will get passed. We do believe there'll be an infrastructure bill with some tax, but it'll tend to shrink probably than if it's bipartisan, it certainly will shrink, and it will be later. And in some scenarios, it could be way later in the year rather than sooner in the year.
And Barry, as they say, the DC team says, the AICPA DC team, bills die a few deaths before they're passed.
That's right.
So right now, and then we're also hearing that some real detailed specifics are being negotiated related to the infrastructure bill, and no one's seen the legislative language, but the staffers are talking about those specifics.
And the Republicans are saying, I'm not voting unless I see the language, and you can certainly understand that point. But Washington has passed many a bill before the language has been written. And so you got both sides of that coin. But that's right, the details aren't there. But then there is, very, very significant fights over some detail. And that's just how the process works. I should shift to the IRS, and it also has a tie to what I just described. And every one of you in public practice, and probably most of you in businesses, have had very high degrees of frustration with the services from the IRS. It is a widespread feeling. It's not just in our profession. That's what's changed over probably the last 60 days. The American public, the tax-paying public, has become very vocal to their members of Congress about their own personal frustrations with the IRS. Previously to that, it was us and a few others making the point about preparers' frustration with the IRS. But now it's actually shifted to the front lines, if you will, to the American public. And one of the things that was a pay-for in all of this infrastructure element was an estimate of $1 trillion of additional revenue to come about from funding the IRS to a greater degree and closing what's called the tax gap, the theoretical amount of tax versus the actual amount of tax that is collected. And because of certain things in that process and some information about how much backlog was there, and then the taxpayer advocate giving other information, and this grassroots of taxpayers saying, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Congressman, I am really frustrated with the Internal Revenue Service, that is pretty much off the table now. Doesn't mean it can't come back, but right now that is off the table as a pay-for in this sort of budget process that's being talked about in infrastructure. There are bills pending that we have been supportive of and worked on that are about service enhancements, including some funding for technology enhancements which are needed, but those are short-term solutions, but also a bill that's talking about penalty relief. The best possible thing for the IRS, I would say 2 things, is the notice, I call it the notice machine, has to be toned down because of the the crossing in the mail, the unopened mail, and notices going out, that is just driving everybody crazy. And then I would say liberal penalty relief because of the sort of catch-22 that you as preparers and taxpayers are in this particular process. There's actually legislation pending. We'll see if it can gain some traction that actually forces that more liberal penalty relief, which obviously we are very supportive of. I would encourage you, if you have a client in that situation, to not only have the burden on you to try to resolve it, but to have them call their or write their member of Congress to explain the details, you know, redacting it as necessary, but to give real-life stories. Congressmen react to that very effectively.
And we know the town hall attendees do reach out to the policymakers when we've asked in the past, Barry. So
and then the big one is the ERC.
The ERC, you know what? We're gonna get into ERC. So why don't we just put a hold on that until we kind of dive into it with Lisa Simpson and our other thought leaders that you now see here on stage. And one thing I do want to remind everybody is please do ask questions both here at the Engage event and via as well as the town hall attendees, and we will try to address some of those questions real time. What I want to do now is I want to introduce Jim Bork and Lindsey Stevenson. Jim Bork, and both of them are key leaders here for the Engage event. Jim Bork has been a chair and on the committee of Engage since it was created. I think many of you know him. He's one of the technology leaders in the profession. He's a partner at Witham, Smith & Brown. So welcome, Jim. Great to have you.
Yep, super happy to be here, Eric.
And Lindsey Stevenson, who's the Chief Transformation Officer at BPM, a top 100 firm. She previously was working in banking. She's an AICPA Academy grad, and she is currently the co-chair of Engage. So welcome, Lindsey.
Thanks for having me.
So let's get right into this. And Jim, I'm going to kick it off and ask you the first question. What a year. Every session here at Engage, Jim, and I'm sure you've already been in a few, the speakers are talking about what an extraordinary year and what the past year has meant to them. So I want to get your thoughts on that, and also about just us all coming together.
So I tell you, Eric, it's been a wild ride. So like all of you, I've been working remote. Our whole firm has been remote. Been doing these things remotely for the last year and a half, and what a great time to come back, right? Just connecting with a lot of familiar faces and just looking at the changes in the profession. I look at, obviously I have a fatal attraction to technology, and Barry's often said this, technology is moving at the light of, at the speed of light. It's been crazy what we've seen, and we've all been the beneficiaries of utilizing technology by allowing us to do our audits remotely, do our tax work remotely, in my world, do advisory remotely. It's been crazy. It's been a wild ride, but just so happy to be back here at Engage live, the very first big conference in over a year and a half. It's wild.
It feels good, huh?
It does feel good. You can tell. I'm super pumped up. But I'm really super happy to be here at Engage this year.
Hey, Lindsey, I mean, it was great being with you last night at the Thought Leader Dinner. I know you've been connecting with so many. What are your thoughts on the past year and being here at Engage?
I think the last year has just created so many opportunities. I know it was hard. It was hard to have your kids home and try and educate kids while you're trying to work, and at least that was my house. And it was fun for us, relationship-wise, with my husband to be in the same space all day long.
You did say fun, right?
I said fun because he might be watching. I love you. But in terms of coming out of that, I think there's just been so much hype, right, of just getting back together. And I started thinking about why does that matter to us, or why is it so important? And I think, at least for me personally, it's this thought process of productivity being secondary. So when we're here at Engage, it's not about producing. And I feel like the last 18 months, because the lines were so blurred between home and work, that it was just so productivity focused. It was get as much out as you can get done, be as effective as you can be as efficient. We have limited time, and you come to Engage and you're like, you know what? I don't need to be productive, I'm just connecting. Oh my gosh, does it feel so good to just ask what you've been doing for the last 18 months. No Zoom call in the last 18 months for me has been like, oh my gosh, how's your dog? until the dog comes on screen, right? And then everybody wants to talk about the dog. So I feel like that has been really freeing, and just the relationship piece, right? And that re-energizing the commitment to your vision and your mission and why are we here and what are we doing? This is engaged, right? Like you just feel so much better when you're here. You're ready to go.
Well, thanks for your leadership. I mean, we were talking about that last night at an event, and the Engage committee, you really thought this through well with the AICPA conference team, and it's really been pulled off excellently. So let's just, and Lisa and Barry, please jump in here. Now you're looking forward. So what are you thinking about, Jim, for the remainder of 2021 and going into 2022?
For me, it's all about advisory, right? So I take all that knowledge that I've gained over the last 30 plus years in the profession. I'm a CPA, I'm proud of it. Now I'm saying, what else can I do by being a CPA? It's all those other things that my clients would previously buy from other providers, right? If my clients only knew that I had the ability to provide those services, you know what? As a trusted professional, they'd probably buy it from me. So I literally spend every single day talking to our clients and find out what else we could be doing for them besides the compliance services, the audit, the tax work, which is all great. It's all those other things. So that's what I deep dive on all the time.
Lisa?
Hey, I'll just start by saying I'm so happy to be here. It's great to see all the friendly faces and the names that I've recognized from the town hall attendee list, but it's great to be able to put a face with a name, and just so excited to get to talk to the thought leaders that we have with us. Jim is absolutely right. We have an opportunity to leverage the position and the trust that you've created over the last 18 months in walking your clients through the chaos and the fear. So how can we capitalize on that opportunity strategically, which is what Eric, Barry, and I have talked about on previous town halls, just to make sure that we're approaching it with the right mindset, the right billing structure, the right staffing structure, and to do things in a coherent and controlled manner to really keep that trusted advisor position going.
Barry, a topic that is being talked a lot about here is cyber and the security breaches. I actually think Jim just gave a session on it. I know it's something that you're thinking about.
Yeah, I think this, obviously we're a profession that confidentiality is a hallmark of our profession, and we've seen some high profile, the ransomware issues. Your clients or your employers, for those of you who work in corporate, it's certainly one of the top issues of our day, and it has become a big business to attack and a lot of different people, a lot of different types of businesses. And what we're seeing is, as firms, particularly, there is some weak spots there, and people are thinking, the bad guys and women are thinking about smaller enterprises. I think when we attacked cyber in the past, there was some notion of, it's not really going to be, for us little guys and gals, however you defined it. And I think we're seeing that actually cascade down. On the other side, I think it is much like Jim was talking about, and we could spend time talking about ESG in the same way. I think it's an example of this broadening footprint of the profession where our expertise of connecting the dots, and I like to use the term seeing around the corner, of what is really happening and is important for the business. Your clients, if you're in public practice, no matter what industry vertical they're in, they're probably not getting as much sort of trend and leading thinking aspects as you are being part of this profession. And that gives you an opportunity to really be a thought leader inside your client's business, or if you're the CFO or other professional accounting role or other type of C-suite coming from the profession, you have access. Now, some industries do that well, but most don't. And cyber, I think, is an opportunity to really have those types of discussions that may lead, as Jim said, to additional work, or because Lindsey's in the innovation aspect for a large firm, which you can see how you build other services. But at minimum, you're bringing that trusted advisor thinking process to the client. And there's just almost an endless list of those right now. And the more that firms can embed that knowledge base to be able to derive that, the more value you will create, the more stickiness with the client you will create over the long term.
Well, based on that, Barry, I want to follow up with Lindsey here. I mean, you're Chief Transformation Officer at BPM. So how are you thinking about initiatives related to what we're talking about, these new service areas, and also maybe expand a little bit on talent strategies there?
Yeah, so I mean, we have a lot going on. I think every firm sort of feels that pressure, right, of things have changed around us. So if we don't start thinking more proactively, we'll get left behind, right? Our talent is going to go somewhere else where someone else is being more innovative and thinking about what this looks like. So a lot of our strategies are sort of like the three major prongs, right? There's pricing. How do we price our work? What does that look like? What are we offering to our clients, and when do we do that? How do we cross-sell? Are our teams really actually cross-functional? So there's a lot of conversations going on about how we do that better. You know, we do it well, but I think how do we do it better? The other, I'll go to talent management last because I feel like that's a huge piece. But the other piece is really around the strategy of how do we get more efficient, right? So we have less resources. There is more competition in the market, in every market. So if you were at Kimberly's session on strategic advantage of inclusion, she talked a lot about outside the profession, who's coming in and taking our talent, right? Who's coming in and offering services to our clients that traditionally have been ours to own. There's a lot of opportunity for our firms to start thinking about what else are we doing and how do we do it more efficiently so we can meet that need and fill that hole so another organization, another entity outside the profession isn't coming in and filling that void. So there's a lot of initiatives around that and data analytics inside our firm. The last, you know, on the talent management, acquisition, and retention side, it's so big. It's just such a huge moving part. So there's so much opportunity for us to think creatively. Instead of looking at who's in the pipeline and how are we recruiting, those are important factors and they always will be. But the bigger picture is how are we global? We have an India workforce of incredibly talented and qualified individuals that we just are underutilizing. So as a firm, how do we get better about doing that? What metrics are we going to put in place to make sure that all of our partners recognize that resource is available to us? The other thing is things for retention. We have an in committee, which is our inclusion committee. They've set up colleague resource groups. So we did surveys about what do our people want from each other? How do they want to interact with us? How do they want to connect with us? So we've created those. And then the last big one is our workforce model. So we did a survey to find out if people want to work hybrid or they want to work remotely or they want to be back in the office full time. And we got that information back, and not surprisingly, a big piece was hybrid, that's the majority, and then virtual, and then in office. And so actually redeveloping our entire workforce model. So not just saying, oh, it's cool if you work from home, we'll figure it out. No, it's if that's what you want to do as a firm, this is the structure that we're going to put in place. This is how we're going to manage you. This is how we're going to connect you to the resources we need. Those are really important initiatives that we're working on as a firm.
Wow, and your first one, just putting pricing as a transformation initiative, I mean, that is really insightful, I think, for all of us here, because we've talked about the evolution of value pricing to subscription pricing. Are you thinking about subscription pricing?
Yeah, so like the advanced pricing model, so really being able to give our clients 3 options and having services build upon services and really being able to allow them to make choices, almost like a menu. And getting away from this is what we're going to charge from a billable hour, even though our WIP never actually gets charged. So trying to create a connection point between how we actually run our business and what we price.
Well, we've got a lot of questions coming in here. I mean, even one here, we've got one on the IRS saying how can they're not even acknowledging the problem, and then we got a request for Chuck Reddick to join us at a future town hall, so we'll pass that on. We've got a question about the Fed and Barry stating this is the top question right now. Why doesn't the Fed just raise interest rates instead of letting inflation increase? So it's we get a message to the Fed today as they're meeting.
Yeah. The most independent part of the United States is the Fed. So it's an entity along to itself. And if you've ever been in the Fed building, which I've had for meetings, everything is different, from security to how you interact with people. It's so why they do what they do is sort of the whole notion. Go back to Alexander Hamilton and ask him that question, I think, as to why they do what they do.
The last thing they want to do is freeze things up. So that's right. So it's some real complex factors that go into it.
I would say one thing on the IRS, and just because the Commissioner Reddick question there, Commissioner Reddick is a fantastic person. He's been involved in a lot of activities with us over the years. He's a great leader. We do disagree with him on some of the things in this area. You know, I think you have to, just in a balanced point here, and I've said this a lot, there's well-meaning men and women at the IRS that are trying to do the right things. I mean, they're not trying to be an environment that you hate or taxpayers hate. They really aren't. And they are hamstrung with certain things, including they were probably the hardest hit, COVID hit agency in the federal government because of the privacy issues. And frankly, they've had some data leaks that have come out that have hurt them from a reputational perspective that puts them way more in a political environment. And we do not believe the IRS should be politicized. So there are things that we agree with the IRS on in a lot of ways. But, you know, and our team meets with them 2 to 3 times a week and the various levels of staff at the IRS. And there is a lot of cooperation. I do think they could do themselves a lot of good if they did some of those macro points, like the penalty issues that are being just, you know, excessively driven. And frankly, I think they did do themselves some harms talking about what the backlog was, and then a week later, the taxpayer advocate saying, no, it's about 5 times that amount. I think it did hurt them reputationally, and they've been through some of those things in the past, and they've got to, unfortunately, have some work to do to get that reputation back.
Well, thanks for these insights on this kind of discussion about, you know, looking forward and looking back. We're now going to move to a survey that's being released here, I think, at Engage. In this slide, we always leave reference slides, and this is a reference slide for our town hall attendees on the top issues that PCPS has identified. And Lisa, I'll let you clear a high-level slide about that.
Thanks, Eric. So y'all, if you've been to the town halls, you know I love to create eye charts for you guys. So the earlier one was the eye chart. Here's the simplified version. But as a reminder, we'll be digging into this with Carl Peterson on the September 2nd town hall. So join us. We're not just going to talk about the problems, because I'm guessing none of those issues surprise anyone in this room. But what we're going to do is be outlining the resources that we have, or some of the thought leadership that others, your peers, are giving as best practices to try to help with some of these challenges that firms are facing. Just as a base reference point, this was fielded immediately after May 17. So you can feel the pain in that current issues segment. And we've talked about staffing. You will hear throughout the entire conference that staffing is the biggest challenge right now. So how to create that culture that will keep your people engaged, keep them developing, and letting them chart a path to their own success. But it's interesting, if we look at what's expected to be an impact over the next 5 years, you've got staffing continuing, and this is where Barry likes to point out, but that staffing might be different than what it is right now. So Barry, I'm gonna let you take that one.
And we're going to talk about some of that tomorrow in our keynote address. But you know, if you were here at the Engage a few years ago, I talked about staffing being, people would talk about it in a different context. The fact is that as a profession, we hired a lot less accounting graduates over the last several years, and that produced ripple effects back into the education system. And you know, we hired them because we were hiring less because we hired other skills. The fact is, and staffing is, as Lindsey indicated, hugely complicated. There's not like 5 things that fix it. It's a big set of facts. But you know, our starting salary issues on college campuses are comparative to other places that are where graduates are getting jobs and hiring. Is problematic. Now, on the other side, a career in our profession is a hugely successful long-term career, and you know, that's a packaging that we have to go with. And I think purpose is very important. We're shifting resources to the high school level. We think the decisions of what people become is shifting to high school. That's a very important element, whereas it was early college. This generation is going to be more high school, and COVID has had a big impact on that as well. And then frankly, you know, what we do early in one's career is hard work. and there are cultural issues and job structuring issues and things of that nature, and social media has an impact on that. And at the same time, we have this large group of baby boomers who are near retirement, but people are extending their work careers. And so there's just a multitude of factors that are in play. And I think in the long term, the difference will be we're going to be not so much pyramid-shaped firms, and I'll talk about that tomorrow, but what I call fat middle organizations. And I would predict if we come here 5 years from now, we're really going to be talking about the war for talent, not at the entry level, but in that sort of middle part of the firm. And we're going to see a lot more movement of people from business and industry into public accounting over the next 5 years.
Just want to go to some of the attendee questions. We've got some advocacy requests coming in that's risen up to the top. We will take that away, requesting us to really push for tax penalty relief. You can see
we are pushing for
that is noted in the top issues here in the PCPS survey. That's the first time, Lisa, right, that we've had IRS as a challenge in the top 5.
It's been across the firm size spectrums. I think it was ranked as a top issue for all but the largest, the 21 plus firms. So yeah.
So Jim, when you look at this here, just I want to have you and Lindsey make a quick comment, then we're going to move on to the next topic, talk a little bit about status of business relief programs. But when you look at what you see here, what strikes you?
What strikes me is, think about this. Look at the expected over the next 5 years. Capabilities to adapt to changing client needs, right? So as CPAs, we need to make sure we're armed with all the right tools in our tool belt, right? It's all about the data today, the way in which we audit, the information that we audit. So we want to make sure that we have the right tools. Emerging technologies like data analytics, blockchain, AI, you don't have to be experts in each of those areas, but you need to know enough about them to understand how that's going to impact how we do the audit, how we service our clients, and more importantly, from my perspective, I look at all of this as opportunities for us to drive advisory services within all of our firms.
Well said. Lindsey?
Yeah, I mean, 100% on board with everything that Jim said. And I think, in BPM, what we have been doing, which has been kind of a fun process, is to explore the skill sets that aren't apparent in our workforce. And so things like emerging technologies like data analytics, we now have a data analytics implementation team, and they are people who are serving our clients in our normal practice areas who have a passion for algorithms and coding, and I don't even know what else because I don't understand some of the things that they're talking to me about, and I just sit on the phone and take mad notes and say, okay, how do we utilize you better? We clearly are not utilizing you as a firm in the right way. And so I think there's so much opportunity to look at your workforce and say, wow, we have these skill sets already, and that, to Barry's point, that middle fat organization is taking that data entry, easy, I say easy, but time-intensive work and creating the automation and data analytics tools to do the work so that you can leverage your people that have other skill sets to do the analytic, the analysis, and the communication of that. And I do think we will be there in 5 years. It's just going to happen with or without us. So.
Right. Real quick question for you, Lindsey, on this. You just recently moved from corporate to the public accounting firm after a long career, and as Eric said, you're a Leadership Academy graduate. So I'm going to ask you some of those skills we taught you. Is there anything there that surprises you from a corporate perspective? Because remember, about half of the CPAs in this country work in corporate.
No. So I think the capabilities to adapt to changing client needs, I think in my corporate life, we were trying to figure out how we adapt to dealing with the regulatory environment, the reporting environment. ESG was such a huge, that conversation for the bank was crazy. And blockchain, right? We don't even understand blockchain, but the FDIC is going to require us to leverage blockchain and all of those things. And we were going to our CPA partners and saying, oh my gosh, how do we even plan for that? So it's a service they've never provided for us, right? It's a very advisory-based service of how do we even think about preparing for this. So I think those are spot on with what's happening in business and industry as well.
Thank you.
Well, Lisa, guess what? We got some PPP and ERC questions coming in, so let's get onto that. Always a favorite topic here at the town hall. So we're going to do a real high level here about business relief. We'll hit on forgiveness in a minute, but Lisa, the other items?
Yeah, we'll do a real quick run through on these other programs. But Restaurant Revitalization Fund, as you all know, the money's run out. There is a conversation around trying to replenish it. The National Restaurant Association is asking for about $60 billion. That's with a B. And there is some movement on it, but it's unclear yet as to how it's going to actually play out. There are different approaches in the House and the Senate as to how that $60 billion could be structured, and whether or not it's going to come through as a standalone bill or be included in the larger package that Barry was talking about earlier.
Or not at all.
Or not at all. Absolutely, I think that's entirely fair. And so we'll keep you posted on that. But as of right now, you know, there's a little bit of movement, but not much. Shuttered Venue Grant, they just announced earlier today that they had given about $7.5 billion to 10,000 grantees. So there's still money left in that program. We talked last week on the town hall about the fact that if you have a client who had a 70% more revenue decline, they might be eligible for an additional grant amount. So no details yet on that, but theoretically they don't have to apply, and they'll just come through the process. That's also directly with the SBA. Employee retention credit, everyone's favorite topic. I'm waiting for the booze. You know, again, we're continuing to advocate with the IRS and actually trying, having some conversations with a congressional office about trying to push that guidance along. So obviously they understand the need and they understand the complexity. Our tax team, really quickly, is last week they released a podcast on what to do if you have to file a return and you know, you don't have some clear guidance on that. So check out that podcast, specifically on our ERC webpage.
And it's another example that if the IRS guidance came out, they would win a lot of friends in that process that they're not winning today. So.
Yeah,
Well, Lisa, and here's a question that's coming in from the engaged attendees. Let you take it. It's, you know, PPP borrowers filed for PPP loan forgiveness, you know, prior to understanding the changes with ERC. So this is something that was done last year, and they, you know, used just payroll costs. You know, there's no allowance to allow them to amend the application. Where does that stand?
As of right now, you know, there is a process to appeal the forgiveness decision, but it's not going to be an easy process. And you know, we'll certainly continue to advocate that if you file for forgiveness before this ERC guidance came out earlier in the year, that you should be given some adjustments. We were not at all pleased with that interpretation once it came out.
And that just takes us to this slide, because you've got right here, this slide shows you what has happened related to forgiveness in particular. And this is as of June 30th, so these numbers are higher, and it has been a busy month for forgiveness applications to be processed by lenders and the SBA. But you see there was 11.77 million PPP loans, 4.1 million of those were forgiven as of June 30th. One thing that we're talking about firms with related to strategies for the 2021 PPP loans is patience, as we try to work through, you know, these ERC questions. So that question from before was for someone who already filed, but there is probably a patient strategy related to 2021 loans. So Lisa, anything you want to add related to this data?
Yeah, we are certainly hearing from you guys that the pace of forgiveness is picking up. The SBA has 90 days to rule on a lender's decision for forgiveness. They were not meeting that 90 days, but now they're actively working to speed that up to theoretically 30 days. We've gotten some notes from you guys that say that it's been approved within a couple of weeks or up to a few days. So there is some momentum there. But again, I think Eric's point about patience for your 2021 borrowers, unless they're in a situation where they're trying to sell the business and they need to get that loan forgiven, then I think patience is a good strategy. We talked about the SBA portal last week that might allow borrowers to go direct to the SBA to file for forgiveness. We're still waiting on that IFR, and if you know, once we hear more about that, we'll certainly be communicating. Twitter, LinkedIn, Journal of Accountancy, those are the best ways to stay up with the breaking news that we're coming across, and we'll make sure we communicate that out.
And one thing we're always working on is the common approach and trying to get, you know, 5,500 lenders out there trying to process these forgiveness loans. and we're working to try to get everybody to have a standard approach. But guess what? Not all lenders have standard approaches. You can leverage some of our materials at times to communicate with the lender on what they should be requesting for your clients. Sometimes if it's an easy request, it might just be best to comply with that lender request, because they're the ones who are driving the forgiveness back to the SBA. And the SBA portal will be coming, but the large banks are going to continue to utilize their portals.
Eric,
So-
a question we frequently got continuing into this week is if the borrower's payments are due on the loan. They've finished their 10-month deferral period, and they start making payments before they actually submit their forgiveness application. Again, I gave an IFR reference last week in the slide deck that points you to the fact that they will be refunded any overpayments that they've made. So no need to panic if they have to start making a couple of payments. If it's not an intensive cash flow burden, you don't panic. Do the forgiveness application correctly.
And one thing that we're talking to firms about is their strategies, and that's one thing that's being talked a lot about here at Engage. But what is your billing strategy, to support forgiveness? And that's something that is critically important to think about, because this is going to continue for the rest of 2021 and into 2022. I don't know, Jim or Lindsey, any comments you want to share related to business relief strategies?
Well, I can tell you what we did. I mean, in watching the town hall series, you guys all learned about PPP, you all learned about forgiveness, you all had access to a lot of great content about that. That's the type of work that our clients really, really, really appreciate that we delivered over the last year, because we were there for them, right, with this process. And not that it's an open wallet with our clients, but it's a lot easier for our clients to pay us on the kind of stuff that they really, really appreciate. So we've had no issues in billing on our time associated with all of this advisory and trusted advisor work.
Thanks, Jim. So we're now going to move into open forum. We've got a lot of questions coming in here. So let me just jump into a couple of them here. There's more on, it's been talked a lot about, but this is being moved up to the top, just the taxpayer advocate and how we're helping the taxpayer advocate to have a larger voice at the IRS.
Well, yeah, I mean, first off, the taxpayer advocate is totally independent and says what she wants to say, and but we certainly have been, communicating and getting communications from her and making certainly the stories, as I like to say, aware. I really think the issue right now is Congress. Congress is reaching out to us because members of their constituents saying to them their frustration with the IRS. So in the last 45 days, it has shifted from us making the arguments to Congress about what they need to do to Congress people coming to us saying, what can we do about this problem? So that's a result of the grassroots being very clear to the member of Congress about their frustration. So the advocate helps on some of these broad data points, but this is ultimately going to be Congress forcing the IRS to address certain issues.
Well, we've got a lot of questions. As we state always in the town halls, we take these back, we learn from them. So I'm just going to give a couple of closing questions to two of our leaders here, volunteer leaders at Engage, Lindsey and Jim. So Lindsey, what are you trying to gain here at Engage over the next couple of days, and what do you want to take back to BPM?
I mean, there's so much content, right? There's going to be a lot of archive diving after the conference is over because I can't go to everything. But, for me personally, a lot of the tech sessions are really helpful because data analytics initiative is really important to us right now, and sometimes I don't understand the language of our team. And so I'm trying to just become maybe not fluent, but at least understanding that language. So those are really important. And then, I'm once an edger, always an edger. So, any career development, edge development that I can take back to the firm and make sure that we're injecting into, our emerging leadership group, I make sure to get those back.
Well, thanks for your leadership, Jim. And we are kind of in a lightning round here. So how do you take these learnings back to Witham and kind of, drive additional success?
So Eric, try to be like a sponge, right? So I have fatal attraction to technology. So I love all the new technologies, the latest and greatest stuff that we see here at Engage. that allow us to service our clients in ways that we've never serviced them before. From AI to blockchain to RPA, it's all coming together here at this great venue at Engage.
Thanks. Well, thank you both. Here's our recent AICPA Town Hall series. You can leverage the archive versions. Please do. Lisa?
Wanted to give a shout out because if you'd like to meet a couple of the folks who've been behind the scenes working on these resources that you see on the screen here, they're at our PCPS and tax section booth. So we're over in section 100 of the town hall, or in the exhibit hall. We also have a virtual booth. So for our online attendees, come see us and say hello to the hardworking folks who've been building these resources for you.
Great. And here, let's stay connected. You know, we do these twice a month. If there's a breaking news event or some breaking legislation, as you all know, we do special editions. We did one right before New Year's Eve, so we always will schedule one if it's needed. Here's the upcoming episodes. This is free for AICPA members. It includes CPE. We do the auto registration, the calendaring capabilities, so take advantage of those. And we also have a town hall newsletter that kind of breaks down some of the top questions that we receive every week. So Barry, I'll let you close out here at Engage. It's great to be with everyone here. It's great to be with the 7,000 to 10,000 attendees that we have on a regular basis here on these town halls.
Well, I know I can speak for the team and for you on this, Eric, that having this live, getting to this point in the evolution of COVID is a big thing. It's a big thing for the town hall series. I think the commitment on these, we're going to have, for a foreseeable future, a lot of leading edge and developing issues, and the Town Hall series will stay with us. Eric, you have been passionate about keeping everyone informed on this and leading this. I want to publicly thank you from that standpoint and really acknowledge your leadership in that space. But I do think since we started these to getting to today, this is a very significant point in time. They will build from here, they will evolve as necessary from here, but I do think that what we have been through as a profession and some of the things that Jim and Lindsey have talked about, that we ought to take stock in that as a profession. And I encourage the people who are here and the people who are online to take a pause and really think about how successful the profession has been and how important the profession has been to the economic survival, really, of so many small businesses in this country.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for your participation. You can now subscribe to the AICPA Town Hall series on your favorite podcast platform, as well as watch archives on YouTube and AICPA TV. Tune in for live broadcasts Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time.